Picture a place where two oceans argue for hundreds of miles, and the land caught in between decided long ago that it would rather be scarce than soft. That's Baja California, a finger of desert over 750 miles long, stretching between the Pacific and the Sea of Cortez, making it the second longest peninsula on the planet. And here's the thing about this place. It wasn't always separate. Millions of years ago, it was welded to the Mexican mainland. Then the San Andreas Fault did what it does, and the land started tearing away, slow and stubborn, until a whole new sea opened up between the pieces. That gap became the Gulf of California. Waters so rich a French explorer once called it the aquarium of the world. But flip your gaze from the water to the land, and everything changes. No rivers, no reliable rain. Some regions go years without a real storm. This is a peninsula that survives on absence, and somehow, life still finds a foothold. Cacti root themselves in dust that shouldn't support anything. Roots spread wide instead of deep, grabbing whatever moisture drifts by before it disappears. Climb higher though, and Baja contradicts itself. Up in elevation, the desert gives way to pine forest. The air cools, moisture lingers. And in winter, actual snow falls on peaks that sit just a few hours from cactus fields. Even the name California has mythical roots. It started as a fictional island in a 16th century Spanish novel, a place of imagined riches. When explorers found this isolated strip of land surrounded by water, they figured they'd stumbled onto exactly that. Follow the peninsula down to its southern tip, and you hit Cabo San Lucas, where the Pacific and the Gulf finally collide head-on. That collision has been grinding away at the coastline for millions of years. The same tectonic stretching that split Baja from the mainland also fractured the rock here. Waves from both bodies of water hit this point simultaneously, doubling down on the erosion. And that's exactly how you get the arch. El Arco started as one continuous wall of stone. But rock isn't uniform. Weaker layers gave way first, hollowed into caves, then tunnels, until the ocean finally punched clean through to the other side. For most of its history, Cabo San Lucas was nothing more than a quiet fishing village, rich in marine life thanks to its location, but almost impossible to reach. No real roads connected it to the rest of Baja until the mid-1900s. Once infrastructure arrived in the 1970s, tourism followed fast. Resorts went up. The marina filled with yachts. A remote outpost turned into a name recognized worldwide. Now, about that Gulf, the Sea of Cortez wasn't carved by water wearing down land from above. It was pulled apart from underneath, the crust stretching and fracturing until seawater rushed in to fill the gap. That origin story matters because it shaped a sea unlike any other, narrow, enclosed, with limited exchange with the open Pacific. That isolation traps nutrients and creates its own current system, and underneath the surface, the seafloor is anything but flat. Underwater mountains, deep trenches, all of it feeding an explosion of life. Plankton blooms first, then fish gather in dense schools, and predators follow the fish. Dolphins cut through the surface, sea lions crowd rocky outcrops, and then the true giants show up. Blue whales, drawn here by food density so reliable that encountering one isn't rare, it's practically expected. Then there's the moment when the water itself seems to explode. Mobula rays, sometimes thousands at once, glide beneath the surface in perfect sync, then suddenly launch themselves into the air. Nobody's fully cracked why. Parasite removal, communication, mating behavior, probably some combination none of us fully understands yet. Where the rays gather, hammerhead sharks show up too, patrolling the edges with a hunting style built into their strange anatomy. That wide head isn't just a shark oddity, it's a sensor array, with eyes spaced for wide-angle vision and receptors tuned to detect electrical signals other animals give off. They're not swimming through the water so much as scanning it, picking off anything disoriented by the chaos. Further along, at Cabo Pulmo, a coral reef holds on against odds that should have wiped it out. It's one of the oldest reefs in the eastern Pacific, thriving in conditions usually too unstable for coral to survive at all. Currents deliver the nutrients, the reef provides the structure, and together they build something rare, an ecosystem where life doesn't just pass through, it settles in and multiplies. Head north along the Gulf Coast and you reach La Paz, the capital of Baja California Sur. Where Cabo feels built to conquer the ocean, La Paz feels built to live alongside it. Spanish explorers named the bay for its calm, though that calm didn't extend to survival. Isolation and a lack of fresh water made early settlement brutal, and it wasn't until the 1800s that the city actually stabilized. Its historic core still centers on a plaza anchored by the Cathedral of Our Lady of Peace, built in 1865, simple colonial lines, twin towers. From there, The shoreline opens into Playa Balandra, water so clear and so shallow you can walk out a long way and barely wet your knees. The seabed slopes so gradually that light reaches all the way to the sandy bottom, and rising out of that shallow water is a single balanced rock, El Hongo de Balandra, shaped slowly by wind and gentle wave action into something that looks almost sculpted on purpose. Just offshore, a chain of islands breaks up the coastline, and one stands out. Isla Espiritu Santo, its cliffs glowing red and ochre in low light, colored by volcanic rock exposed as the land pulled apart millions of years ago. It's a fragment of the original peninsula, cut loose and left to evolve on its own terms. And when night falls completely, the water does something that looks almost fake. Waves glow electric blue as they break. It's not a trick, it's bioluminescence, produced by microscopic plankton called dinoflagellates. Individually invisible, but in massive numbers, disturbed by movement, they trigger a chemical reaction between a molecule called luciferin and an enzyme called luciferase. Every footstep, every wave, lights up the water for a second before it's gone. Back on land, the desert dominates most of the peninsula, miles of open dust where roots have learned to spread rather than dig deep. In Valle de los Cirios, cacti take every shape imaginable, some low and wide, some towering and column-like after decades of growth. And among them stands one of the strangest plants on Earth, the boojum tree, which doesn't grow straight up at all, twisting instead into irregular shapes that taper the higher they climb. Push north toward Cataviña, and the ground itself starts falling apart, literally. Massive granite boulders sit scattered across the desert floor, some balanced on narrow points, others split clean down the middle. That granite formed underground millions of years ago from cooling magma. Erosion stripped away everything above it over time, and granite doesn't weather evenly. It fractures along natural seams until solid rock separates into individual boulders. They weren't placed there, they were simply uncovered. Then the Sierra de San Pedro Martir rises up like it belongs somewhere else entirely. Cooler, wetter, covered in pine and fir, snow settling on its peaks in winter while cactus fields bake below. It's remote enough and dark enough at night that Mexico built one of its most important astronomical observatories right here. The history of settlement follows the water. In 1697, Jesuit missionaries built the first permanent mission in the region, and from that single settlement grew Loreto, once the capital of the Californias. Everything about survival here had to be adapted: farming around scarce water, construction around brutal heat. Inland missions like San Francisco Javier de Vigues Biondo still stand largely intact, thick-walled and simple, built to outlast both time and climate. San Ignacio's mission, built from dark volcanic stone in 1728, sits at a palm-lined oasis, the reliable freshwater source that made permanent settlement actually possible there. Heading toward the Gulf's eastern shore, Bahia Concepcion unfolds as a long, curved inlet, sheltered by the Sierra de la Giganta from the open water. Small coves break up the coastline one after another, the sea shifting from deep blue in the center to pale turquoise near shore, and beneath that clear water, giants move without urgency. Whale sharks, the largest fish alive, up to 40 feet long, filtering plankton through mouths that stay open as they swim. No two are marked the same way, which lets researchers track individuals across entire oceans just by their spot patterns. Sea turtles pass through these same nutrient-rich waters for most of their lives, invisible until instinct pulls them back to one specific stretch of coastline to nest. They dig a chamber in the sand, lay dozens of eggs, and leave. Weeks later, hatchlings break the surface together and instinctively crawl toward the brightest horizon, the reflected light over open water, before vanishing into the Gulf's currents. Far to the north, the landscape turns industrial at Guerrero Negro, home to one of the largest salt operations on Earth. Seawater gets pulled into evaporation ponds, and under relentless sun, the water disappears while the minerals crystallize behind it. Machines harvest the salt in long lines before it ships out globally, an entire industry built purely on sun and dry air. Nearby, Laguna San Ignacio becomes a nursery once a year when gray whales arrive after one of the longest migrations of any mammal alive, traveling thousands of miles down from Arctic feeding grounds. Mothers give birth in these sheltered waters and spend weeks teaching calves to surface and breathe. And in a place where whales usually keep their distance from people, these ones don't. Some drift close enough to touch, lifting their heads for contact that feels almost deliberate. On the peninsula's eastern edge sits San Felipe, where the tides swing more dramatically than almost anywhere else in Mexico. The sea can pull back for miles, exposing wet sand flats that redraw the coastline twice a day. Once an isolated fishing town, roads connecting it to Mexicali in the mid-1900s brought tourism in behind them. Switch to the Pacific side, and the ocean stops being gentle. At La Bufadora, waves don't just meet the shore, they slam into it, forcing water through a hidden sea cave until pressure has nowhere left to go, and it erupts, sometimes over 60 feet into the air, the sound arriving a beat after the spray, a deep rolling boom through solid rock. Ensenada grew differently than most of Baja's coastal towns, with direct Pacific access that let it become a real shipping port, instead of just a fishing stop. Cargo and fleets built its early economy. Cruise ships and steady road links to the border keep it moving today. Its identity is inseparable from what comes out of the water. Fish tacos originated here, simple and precise, still central to how the city sees itself. The climate stays cooler than the southern peninsula thanks to Pacific fog rolling in, and that cooler, moderated air is exactly what makes the nearby Valle de Guadalupe work as Mexico's primary wine region, a rare Mediterranean-style pocket where cool nights, morning fog, and warm afternoons let grapes ripen evenly. Way up at the northern edge, geography gives way to politics. Tijuana sits directly on the U.S. border, its growth accelerated a century ago by Prohibition-era demand from the other side. Today it's dense, industrial, and constantly in motion, crossings happening non-stop in both directions, a concrete wall running straight through hills and valleys before finally disappearing into the Pacific. Further east, Mexicali trades ocean influence for raw desert heat, summer highs pushing past 115 degrees, among the hottest urban temperatures in the country. The city only exists because of early 1900s irrigation projects that redirected Colorado River water into what used to be empty desert. And like a lot of border cities, there's a harder layer underneath the surface. Organized crime networks, including groups like the Sinaloa cartel, operating in the shadow of legitimate trade routes. Back down at the southern tip, San Jose del Cabo started life as a mission town in the 1700s, built around a dependable freshwater source. Its historic center still shows that colonial layout, a central plaza, narrow streets, whitewashed low buildings designed to manage heat, all anchored by the original mission church. Today, a corridor of resorts lines the coast, tourism folding the town into the larger Los Cabos identity. And just down the road, Playa Cerritos looks unassuming at first, a simple arc of sand backed by low hills. But the Pacific arrives here after building energy across thousands of uninterrupted miles of open ocean, and that energy turns into some of the most consistent surf on this stretch of the peninsula. Development stays minimal, a few small hotels scattered against a desert backdrop that never really lets up. That's Baja California, start to finish. A single peninsula holding an entire spectrum of extremes, desert and reef, whale sharks and boojum trees, ancient missions and modern border cities, none of it defined by one landscape alone. All of it defined by how violently different environments end up pressed against each other, each one shaping what happens next.